Welcome back, everyone. This is our third podcast with Nate Zelinsky. Thanks for coming on again.
Man, I'm excited to be here. These are fun.
It's just a total blast. We've had awesome reviews on the last ones we did with you, and we're not going to stop. So this is a hunting podcast. So this is getting away from more of the fishing. Who is Nate? Predominantly fishing guy, and turning it into, let's talk about your hunting background, which is just as diverse. So I wanted to just kind of start by talking about, springtime. You've got hunting deadline, application date, usually early April here in Colorado. Also other states usually have very similar dates. And then you've got spring turkey. So I kind of wanted to get into both of those things. I think we probably start out, let's just talk about like hunting as a whole in the application process, kind of like what you're looking forward to maybe getting yourself, and some things that you think about in terms of like getting ready for the season in spring, because surprisingly enough, you're getting ready 365.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The hunting season for me is year round. You never leave it, So, you go through the hunting process in the fall, which depending on where you're hunting, what you're hunting for, starts in August. And, like my personal last hunt wraps up in Kansas in middle of December. But there's in between states or, late hunts or deprivation hunts for, antlerless. Things go on. I mean, you hunt until, call it first of the year type deal. So it lasts long. And then I pretty much immediately start following up on these animals to see how they winter. And that's one of the things that I think it's very few and far between hunters do, but it's one of those things that I do. So, if I have a rough winter range, bad snow, I want to know, like, are these animals going to survive? Like, are the big bulls taking a hit or the big bucks taking a hit? So I watch them and see what's going on throughout the course of the winter. So I never really leave them or stop. And then obviously as you get closer to spring, you start talking about the draw. So in Colorado, our applications are due on the first Tuesday of April. So every year it's going to be the first Tuesday. And that's when you're going to be put in for that limited draw. So what's in Colorado is your first draw. We have a secondary draw, then a leftover. Lots of opportunity to obtain licenses here in Colorado. But the biggest one is going to be that first Tuesday of April. And, I do consulting for people that are wondering about how to use points, where to apply. I guided for 10 years now. I just hunt and do content for various brands. But there's a lot that goes into it. And, you can look at it from a lot of different perspectives. And my take on the things, and I'll give you kind of the quick 4-in-1 of what's going through my brain. But number one, I hate to say it, I encourage hunters to burn their points, right? I have been talking to a handful of hunters in the last 2 weeks that are sitting on mega points, 25 to 30 points for almost all species. Wow. Luckily, a handful of these have caught up with some of the opportunities, and they're going to draw like the elusive 4 or 5 tags that it takes those 27 to 29 points to draw. Right. A lot of people that are in that like 16 to 20 point are kind of in no man's land. The points keep creeping up a hair. The question of when are they going to catch up? Is it going to be another 10, 15 years? And are they going to be physically fit to go on that hunt? So there's a lot to it. And you look at the northwest corner of the state that is some of those higher draws, and we're introducing wolves there. Are the elk population going to be there when they draw that tag in multiple years? So there's so much that goes into it. So, I always tell people, hey, burn points, and that's how my theory. So everything in this podcast is going to be built on the mindset of hunting every year. Yeah. I don't hold points. I have a handful of points, I'll build up 3-4 points type thing. Sure. And that's a lot for me. And I usually spend them immediately just because I think you can out scout and outlearn the draw, and you can kill just as big of animals on minimal points with more effort than a high draw point that you would have normally. You know what I mean? So sure. I think you can have an unbelievable hunt in so many units in Colorado with minimal points if you're willing to do the work, right? Scout, find that elusive couple percent that are, bigger and better and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity that goes into it. So when we're talking about draw application, my first thought is burn the points. Yep. My second thoughts and kind of how I look at everything is kind of broken into 2 parts. Number one, when I select an area to hunt, I think that having a unit, so a game management unit, the area you can hunt, if you can pick a unit that has diversity, I think that's probably the biggest thing that leads to a successful hunt. So when I look at a unit, I want a unit that has low elevation of 6, 7, 8,000 feet and still reaches up to tree line at, 13,000. Tree line's 11.5. So I want a unit that has it all. So that way, on that year where it's hot and dry, I can go up in elevation and I can find rutting elk, or I can find, summering mule deer, or whatever the case may be. Or, hey, it's the snowiest, gnarliest winter I've ever seen. I can go to a lower elevation. When you pick that kind of more mellow unit, a lot of times your hunting conditions are the same unit wide. If you have that unit that has diversity, which there's tons of, plenty of, it's going to give you more options as a hunter. And I think options lead to a more successful hunt at the end of the day. So I think that's really cool. And then the other thing, we talked about this in fishing, right?
Yeah.
I'm about community. I think one of the biggest struggle points of a hunter is definition, right?
Right.
If you just walk down the aisles of Bass Pro and you find somebody, you're like, hey man, what are you? And you're gonna run into the guy and you'll see him, right?
Yeah.
He looks different, and this person's gonna be like, I'm a bow hunter. And I'm like, cool. Then you got the guy who's like the muzzleloader. Then you got the rifle guys, and they separate, right? They don't get along. They're like gangs and enemies, and we talk about this, but when you look at a unit, right, every unit will have a higher and lower draw rate according to the method of take.
Right.
So you can look at a unit that might be a 6, 7, 8 point unit with a bow, but it might be literally 1 point or no points during fourth rifle. Or a unit that, it's a major deer spot, so fourth rifle is tons of points, archery's over the counter, something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities that I always say break out of your zone, right? If you're a bow hunter, that's awesome. I'm not saying anything against bow hunters. I mean, look behind you. Like, I'm a bow hunter. Oh, yeah. But there's times when I look at the draw results and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a hunter. Whether that's with a rifle, muzzleloader, or bow, I am a hunter, and I'm going to draw more frequently by changing it up. If you stick to your roots of only being a one method hunter, a rifle, a muzzleloader, or a bow, your draw results are never going to be every year, every other year. So I save up a couple points, and I'll hunt other methods during that time where I'm saving points, and then I'll hunt that premium tag. But I'm in the woods hunting every single year. So as I'm getting ready to prepare for my draw, I'm looking at the odds. I'm like, all right, this is a great unit where I'm going to hunt. And when I'm looking at that, what can I draw? So it's not, I want to hunt here and I want to bow hunt it.
Right.
I say, hey, this unit has a lot of elk in it. The genetics are really strong. Everything is lining up to be a great area. How do I get a tag? Not the tag, a tag. And I look through my odds and I'm like, hey, that's perfect. I know I can draw this tag, and that's what I'm going to hunt. So that's kind of what I look for going into a draw.
You make it work, right? You
Absolutely.
make it work with what you have, so you can get out there and have the experience. I did a video on salmon fishing down at the Dream Stream, and one of my favorite parts of that video is just me kind of sitting there thinking about the experience itself, right? I had never been salmon fishing before, and part of the line of my video, and you guys can see this on the channel if you want, there's a salmon video on there. I said, if you get 80 years of spawns, right, 80 years of life, you only get to see that 80 times. Most people don't live to be 80. And your first 10 years, you're probably not doing a whole lot of fishing. You're just doing a whole lot of being a kid. So you're really limited on the amount of time that you get to spend in the woods, and you get to do these kind of things. And, hunting season is only once a year. So I'm a huge advocate for that. I've preached it before. Get out and hunt and just, spend the points. Definitely. Do a little bit more research, and you need less points to go get it done.
That's it.
Yep.
I mean, scouting's everything. Learning, get some education. There's a lot of opportunity, especially in Colorado.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. So, what animal eludes you? What I'm curious. I know, like we talked about previously, your father-in-law and your wife have gotten amazing moose.
Yep.
You've got one hanging in your dining area. But what about Nate? What animal eludes you, or that you're just dying to go after?
Yeah, so I mean, I've hunted a little bit of everything, in the big game world, and I love it. And elk are my thing, right? Elk are my passion, and I've been very successful. I mean, over the counter, public land, fair chase, the whole deal. And I've been fortunate to get some giant bulls where they shouldn't be, and on minimal tags and that kind of thing. Like you said, my wife, and especially here in Colorado, since we're talking Colorado, we'll talk about Colorado draw and Colorado animals.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got them all. She's got a giant billy that would make books. She's got, a big sheep. She's got moose. So she's got all the ones that are hard. She's now trying to apply for a desert bighorn. Her father's pretty much the same way. So I've been a part of all these hunts, just never with tag in my hand.
Right.
I really look forward to the moose and the goat hunts because I've been on dozens of them of successful kills here in Colorado. So I love being on those hunts. I've just never had the weapon in hand.
Right.
So I can't wait for those. But of all the ones that eluded me, it's sheep. I had a sheep tag 5 years ago. And it was the greatest experience of hunting that I've ever had, and I was unsuccessful. And it was all self-failure, and that's the biggest thing that I think made it so neat. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's funny because I get criticism for telling this story because everybody's like, you should not tell people that story. It's embarrassing.
It's hard.
And I'm just like, it's not embarrassing. Like I failed, you know what I mean? And that's what it's about. So I drew a sheep tag. I changed my life, right? I worked harder than I've ever worked to make the money to take off for hunting season more. I hunted in the field more than I ever have. I hiked more than I ever have. From the beginning to the end, I lost 42 pounds. I was skin and bones. My average day was 17 miles on foot. I can honestly say that I found the biggest and most mature 15 rams in the unit I was hunting. And I feel like I picked them all apart. I literally I found all the sheep.
Oh, yeah.
I ranked them out. And I missed so many opportunities where I physically shot and missed to where I couldn't figure it out. So I had a bow tag, and I had been in that unit before with hunters, and a buddy of mine killed one 2 years prior. The year before, I was with on these hunts, and I was like,
yeah,
this is great. That's why I applied for the unit. That's why I applied with archery equipment.
Yeah.
And the year I had the tag, they were in steeper, rougher country than I had ever seen. Your daily approach was to find the animals, put them to bed, and then sneak around and drop in on them. So I'll share some photos in this that you guys can see, but
sure.
Just gnarly. I mean, where you'd be 300 yards from them, it would take you 7-8 hours to get to them. It's so steep.
Yeah.
So my shot angles, not that I'm trying to make excuses, but my shot angles were 40 degrees to 70 degrees.
Right.
I mean, to the point where a couple times you would have to tie off so you wouldn't go tumbling down the mountain. And I could not make those angled shots to save my life.
And you can't replicate them.
I mean, that's just it. And before the season, I'm shooting off my roof. I'm shooting off all this. And I felt prepared.
Yeah.
And then fast forward and then rewind and you watch it all. And, your average tree stand shot is 20, 30 degrees. Your roof shot from your house is 30 degrees. You don't think about how steep 40 degrees,
that actually
50
is,
degrees
yeah.
really is. And yeah, I just wasn't prepared. I didn't have the sight for it. I didn't have the stance for it. So my two failures were I didn't have enough pins to figure out those angles, and every time I would shoot, I would pull my peep off my face because I was tumbling. So for me to bend at the hip enough, I would fall over. So I physically couldn't have the shooting stance I needed because I would fall off. So it was one of those catch-22. So I did the best I could, but I couldn't shoot. And after I had missed my fifth ram or my fourth ram, right?
Yeah.
That's how many times I shot.
Oh, it's killing you.
I had to come back to town to get arrows at one point. So I called Tim Gillingham, right? So
Yeah.
Gold Tip Pro, Bowtech Pro. I mean, he's one of the best shooters in the world, right?
Sure. So
I call him and I'm like, hey, I need a better dope sheet for my bow. So he built me my chart to say, hey, at this angle, shoot this, And I remember calling him from the mountain. So I found the sheep and I crawled down to it. And I'm sitting 58 yards above the sheep. And I'm like, this is it. You can't mess this up. So I hike back up the mountain and I call him. And I'm like, hey, here's the thing. I'm 58 yards. I got a breeze. I said, and it's a 56 degree angle. What do I do? And he was like, shoot it for 11 and a half yards. And I'm like, well, I got a 20-yard pin. So where do I put that? And he goes, you don't got a chance. And I'm like, what? And he's like, so here's the deal. He goes, imagine shooting a 20-yard pin at the range flat.
Right.
He goes, for every quarter inch that you're off bullseye at those angles, he goes, you'll be off 8-9 inches.
Wow.
He goes, so that's the dramatic. He goes, your arrow is not losing speed. It's going so down. He goes, so all the pins are off. Everything, like, mathematically in physics is out of whack from what a bow is built to do, you know. And your third axis is coming into play and all this stuff. So he's like, you know, shoot for 11 and a half. So I'm like, perfect. You know, it's like, went out with my 20. You know, I crawled down the mountain, and I'm like, all right, like,
looks
there's
about right.
20, so let's, you know, pull up a little bit, and we'll send it there. You know, and I missed again. And it was one of those things that I was crushed at the time. You know, I'm still crushed.
Oh, totally.
But I learned more than I've ever learned, and it's just, honestly, it's probably more of a memorable hunt without one than if I would have got one.
Right.
You know, so, I missed a world-class ram on opening morning. And, you know, I just look back, like, if I would have hit that, it would have been epic, but I wouldn't have had the experience I've had. So that's the animal for me that's, like, got the force field around it, literally, like, I mean, I had a ram in its bed that I shot at 3 times that he never, like, it's embarrassing for me to tell the story, but I literally crawled up on this ram, and he hollowed out an area on this hill, and it's just vertical. I mean, I'll show you the pictures.
Steep as it gets.
And I shot, and my arrow is, like, touching him right here, and I came up, like, a half inch, and I'm shooting 70 degrees down. So I'm tied off with a rope.
Yeah.
And my next one goes over him, and I literally moved my pin on animal like a quarter of an inch, and I'm like, so my fluctuation's like 13, 14 inches every time I move a quarter inch. So I'm like, where do I put it next? You know what I mean? Like, you're moving at micro adjustments, and it was impossible for me to hit one, but most epic hunt I've ever been on.
Man, that sounds like a thrill. Those are always the painful ones where you feel like you've got it all and you've done it all. Like losing 42 pounds, I mean, that alone is a confidence booster. But yeah, I mean, to go on a hunt and be unsuccessful is being a true hunter is. That's what it's all about. Being able to walk out of that field and know you got the experience and understand, like you said, your personal failures. I hunted turkey kind of as my beginners into, you know, what wasn't waterfowl hunting or birds coming to you, right? So I got out in the spring blind, and I had a mentor with me, a really great gal named Lynn who does a lot of mentorship in the turkey side. And she took me out to this spot, and we had hunted 3 or 4 spots previously, and it kind of come down to the wire, and we're sort of sitting on a hill waiting for an afternoon bird. And here comes one of the biggest gobblers that she had seen, and you know, that bird came out, and I was pretty dialed on my shotgun and felt really good about it, and had pulled up and just didn't get the quite rest that I wanted, I don't think. And, you know, a feather came out the back of the bird, basically, and I knew it was behind, and the bird took off, and I was devastated. I didn't get a bird that year. I was crushed. You know, it was my first animal that I could kind of consider like a big game hunt. And, it's miserable. It is. And I had to wait 2 years to finally kill one. So I know that feeling.
And I'll never forget, I had come off of a really good streak of, I think I was on 10 bulls straight with a bow, handful of mule deer, pronghorn. I mean, I had shot everything with a bow, and I hadn't missed. So, like, I was so true, you know, and I just got the shot and, you know, follow through. So I shot, and I can't see my arrow fly. You know, so the ram jumps on my very first one and takes off, and he runs like 100 yards, and he stops. I don't even, like, think about getting on another arrow and, like, making another approach. He stood there long enough. I probably could have snuck down there.
Probably.
So I'm just standing there, and I'm literally, like, I don't even put up my binos. I'm just waiting for this ram to fall over. And I'm sitting, I'm like, man, he's hardy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't even dawn on me that I didn't hit him. And I'm sitting there, and he starts looking around, and I'm like, man, this doesn't quite look right. And then he just walks off. And I realized that I missed, and I'm just like, you know, I did, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's awful. Awful feeling. Well, I wanted to talk to you about turkeys.
Yep.
And it's mostly because you've got some little hunters in your family, and they're excited to get out there and do it. So I love turkey hunting. I've got a couple of videos on my channel if you guys want to check it out of me turkey hunting. Everything I've ever done is public land. Yep. This year, I may try to find some private land just so I'm closer to home and I can take care of my 2 young kids and not get yelled at by the wife. But I'm just curious about your background in turkey hunting and what you're planning on doing with your kids this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was an avid turkey hunter when I was young. So, you know, 16, 18 years old, I was just so wrapped up into hunting that anything I could hunt, I would hunt. So, huge into it. And that was all Colorado public land birds, honestly, before it was as popular as it was today. So,
right.
You know, I was hunting, you know, Rampart, you know, whatever, 20 years ago, 22 years ago, 25 years ago. So where it was, I mean, there was people there, but it wasn't busy. So lots of public land birds and very successful, got a lot of birds. And it was kind of a mix of really good sets and, birds coming to you and, strutting for 10 minutes and whacking them, to like run and gun public land chasing and everything else. So I had a lot of great success. And then honestly, I kind of got out of it for 15, 18, 20 years. I did a live hunt with Bowtech in Kansas a few years ago, and had shooting a crossbow, had some unfortunate situations of arrows zipping through them and no recoveries. And, so I honestly had gotten out of it, forever. And I have 9-year-old twins and they're both passing their hunter safety here. And they're going to want to turkey hunt this spring. So I literally haven't pursued them in forever. It's one of those things that I'm going to get back into the game. So I've done a handful of educational stuff on turkeys. I've been in the woods for them a couple times in the past couple years. Feel pretty confident in my turkey game, but by no means would I say I'm super avid in it like I used to be.
Right. No, that's awesome. I'm excited for your kids to get out there.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll be able to be a part of that on the film side. But I mean, as far as their motivation level, it's very high. Yeah. So what's going into the training of getting these kids ready to go?
Honestly, right now they're decent with the call. Not that I don't know. We'll see if they're going to call on Turkey Day, or I really want them just to focus on kind of keeping it together. But they definitely understand the calls. They definitely are like physically fit. They're training, right? So they wear their backpacks and they work out to make sure they can hike through the hills to keep up. So they're great with that. And we just now started doing a lot of shooting. And my kids are extremely small for their size, right, or for their age. Sure. They're I believe one child's like a 3% on the growth scale.
Wow.
The other one's 1%. So they're small kids. And we've been shooting. They've been shooting a 12 gauge, and it blows my mind that they love it.
Yeah.
Like, we started shooting, and I was expecting this like one shot and done. I just want to see how they handle it.
Yeah.
They shoot and like it rocks their body like they're in an octagon at like a fight, and they look up and they're like, "Dad, put another target up," and they love it. So despite what I thought would happen, they're loving the shooting for it. Right now we're shooting traditional shotguns but turkey loads. I know you and I talked. We're kind of going back and forth of optics, no optics. More so for the fact that I think, putting like a Vortex red dot on it is the optimal situation. I kind of want them to go old school. I want my kids to know what I did as a kid. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We have the latest and greatest in all the fishing gear, all the hunting gear. They've been on like 12 big game hunts. They've been exposed to so much cool stuff by their dad being in the industry. That for this, I kind of want them to have to, grind a little bit.
There's got to be one thing.
Again, I think it's one of those things that I think it'd be cool to just kind of old school it. So we'll see if we put optics on it. But yeah, they're ready for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, you need to find a vest full of sand you can put on them so they don't bounce so hard. That's funny. The turkey thing has always been a blast for me, and I think it's the ultimate like beginner because you just really get your passion fired up for it. But I'm excited for your kids, and I know they have ice in their veins, man. These Zelinskys, they've been through a lot of tough, quiet situations waiting on animals. The first time I went filming for you, I shut the car door a little hard. And let's just say Nate was not the one to call me out. It was Lauren and Lane that were giving me the fit about making it loud. And it was a scouting trip.
They're on their game for sure.
They
carry their smoke in the bottle. You get the wind even slightly raw, and they're like, "Dad, fix it right now."
Yeah. We're going to get blown out of here. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see more about that and hear how that goes.
No, it should be fun. They're jazzed. I think anytime you hunt a vocal animal, that's why I think why the elk game is so strong is, hunting is awesome as it is, and you throw the vocalization of an animal on top of it, like a turkey gobble, an elk bugle, any of that, it lights it up.
Absolutely. No, and I think like most of our viewers, maybe they hunt turkeys, maybe they don't, but I think there's always something to learn about turkey stuff. I think in years past for me, the calling aspect has been so minimal, and it's like other animals, you have to understand, are they calling? Do they want to hear calls or do they not? And with turkeys, I found it to be probably the most problematic of any other bird. Waterfowl, you can usually get away with any sort of calling. Sometimes they like it quiet, and that's understandable, and you can tell pretty quickly, and you get another chance at that group of birds. Yep. With turkeys, if they hit the ground and you're calling and they don't want to be called to, or they're used to it being quiet, you're done. Those turkeys are gone. So I've had a lot of success, at least in scouting my birds, showing up late at night, showing up at sunset, and calling to those birds and seeing how they talk on the roost. They're going to gobble. Most of the time they'll shot gobble, give you a good idea where they're sitting. And that was one of my game-changing points in finding birds, was calling them at night and not scouting for them during the day. Because those birds are weary. They don't want to get eaten by a coyote. They don't want to get, eaten by anything. Yeah. So they're making sure that they're tracking their movements well during the day. So that nighttime scouting, the calling thing, it's good to figure out before you get in the field, because once you're there, it's over. If you do it wrong, you're not getting a second chance.
You're gone.
Yep, exactly. So no, that's awesome. I can't wait to hear more about how that goes. Switching kind of gears here, I want to talk a little bit about this animal that divides us on the wall here.
It almost divided us forever.
Yeah, it almost divided us for a lifetime. So a little bit of background story, and then I'll let Nate kind of tell his side, because I think it's better. But I had tried to draw a tag for an area. A neighbor had some property. I was excited to go hunt, and ended up that fell through. So on a whim, I said, Nate, I need some help. Do you know anybody? And ended up being a property on my unit that Nate also hunts from time to time. And we went together. And the deal was, when we showed up, as I do a lot of filming for Nate and his hunt stuff for different companies, the deal was Nate shoots the big one and Chris does cleanup. So this was my first pronghorn. I didn't care too much about exactly what pronghorn I was going to be shooting. I just wanted, to kill a decent pronghorn and get the experience out of it. So I had 5 points. I burned them on, this land, and then ended up finally having a backup hunt to kind of not waste those points. So we get out there, we start hunting, and we crawl into this first batch of trees, and we see the first pronghorn standing there. And Nate and Dean, his father-in-law, are starting to have a bit of a conversation about it. And I think you recall how that conversation went a little better than I do.
So we kind of, we hunt them like we do anything. We have an educated plan. So in this property, we had water low, we had food low. So they plant like their winter grain. So you just have little seedlings coming up. So, first thing in the morning and all night long, the pronghorn are going to be in these, farmed fields type thing. And then up above that, you kind of have where they go in bed. And they sit on these hills during the high heat. Bed there, which is kind of safe. So low light feed, bedding, midday high. So we kind of had a plan. So we snuck up there, and we had not seen any pronghorn yet, so we're just sneaking up, and sure enough, up ahead of us, there's pronghorn everywhere, right? So there's does everywhere, and there's one buck, and so we crawl up to the edge of the field. I get the gun down, right? So the 6mm set up, camera set up, and my father-in-law, Dean, knows the property well. He hunts out there. He knows all the public access, just kind of the routes. So we're like, all right, you come with us. So we're sitting there. Chris is behind the camera. I have my spotting scope up. My father-in-law's got his spotting scope up. And we're looking at that goat. So one, right off the bat, he's a great goat. He's a great pronghorn. So we're like, oh, man, that's a great goat. But in my head, I think I have shot now, in Colorado, probably 30 bucks, maybe more. I don't even know. I can't keep track of them. So we've been able to get a ton of pronghorn. And I told myself, this is the year I want a big one. Yep. So I was like, I got to find a 16-incher. If I can find I've never shot a 15-incher.
Yeah.
But I'm like, my goal is a 16. Let's find one. So we're glassing, and this buck somehow looks at us from every angle. Like I see him from everywhere. And I'm just like, I can't see those back hooks, and I'm just like, man, he's a great one, but I don't think he's the one. So I look at my father-in-law, and he goes, I agree. He goes, he's way more than average, but I don't think he's that one that makes you say, wow. So I look over at Chris. He's behind the camera, and I'm like, hey, Chris is wearing orange. He's got his tag in his pocket. He's ready. And I'm like, hey, that's a great one. I don't think you should pass that one up. He goes, well, aren't you going to shoot it? I'm like, no, I don't think that's the one. So we switch gears, switch hunt modes, Chris gets the gun, and
get on the camera,
Yeah.
Nate. We switched gears totally.
and switch gears, and the gun. He goes, "Is the gun ready?" He's using my gun. I'm like, "Dude, it's ready. Put it on him and smoke him." And right as Chris shoots, the buck falls, and now the sun is like getting up, and as this pronghorn falls, he shows like everything.
His
he
head
twists
turns
just
perfect.
right, and I had not seen the way it dips back. And as he falls, I look over at my father-in-law, and I was like, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure I just made a major mistake. And he's like, what? I'm like, that thing looked like the giant of all giants when he fell. And he goes, I don't think so.
Yep.
So we go out there, and as we walk up, we're 50 yards away, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I can tell you right now, this is not looking good for me.
Yeah.
And we walk up to this thing, and we can post pictures of it. But I mean, depending on measurements, if you're measuring it in the garage, it's a 17-inch goat.
Yeah.
You give it to the right score judge in an official, Boone and Crockett type situation, you're going to measure that goat at 16 7/8.
Yep.
But I mean, we are talking a legit monster, a once in a lifetime in any state. I mean, you have a pronghorn that's brushing 17 inches, it's world class, and I passed it up.
But
I'm very excited for you now because it's sitting in my shop.
Yeah,
Once
exactly.
you take it home, the excitement goes down a little bit.
We've debated about how this works. If I leave it here for 6 months and then I come pick it up and we just keep trading, or how this goes. But yeah, I mean, I don't know the next thing about a pronghorn, right? I've been on, I think previous to that, 1 or 2 trips with you where we filmed other people killing pronghorn. Yeah. I thought it was a blast. I had been applying for my own pronghorn, but I was going to go hunt maybe a unit way, way up north near some of my other units where I'd seen a lot of goats. And it just ended up working out that, my neighbor had this property and then fallen through again. But just the fact that, like, I had sighted in my gun. My gun was ready. I was dedicated to using it, right? And then you're in this moment where you've got another guy on the gun. You're already like, that goat's out of your mind as a cameraman. You're just trying to get the shot. And then to have to change in literally 15 seconds from I'm filming to I'm shooting this, it was a little intense. And, I'm glad that the shot hit and put him down immediately. I mean, he didn't move a foot.
Oh, yeah.
And then we walked up there and saw him, and Nate's like, yeah, that's a mistake. And I'm looking at him like, yeah, he's a good goat, but, I can't tell. I'm used to seeing his elk, and his deer. Like this one next to me here, I mean, they're absolutely pigs. So the pronghorn they show a little bit different. They're a lot smaller animal when you get up to them.
And then we start walking around and showing people, and everybody's like, what?
Yeah, what is that? Exactly. So the rest of the day I heard it from pretty much everybody in the truck as we were, cruising around and finding new spots to hunt. But this pronghorn, I can't thank you enough for helping me put together a ragtag hunt. I can't take a ton of credit for it, but I'll definitely take credit for the shot.
Oh, it's a world-class pronghorn.
Yeah, we put him on the wall. That was one of the first questions that I asked Nate was, is this a wall hanger? And he was like, oh, absolutely. That's Nate's classic line for you're wall mounting this.
Yep.
Or I'm wall mounting it for you.
Exactly.
So anyway, we got him on the wall here. He's going to make it to my house probably after this podcast. We'll see if Nate will part with it, and we'll go from there. But I did want to give a shout out to Dean, his father-in-law. He did an excellent job on this mount. It kind of was a full circle moment because Dean was with us on the hunt, and he got to see it go down. So from down to the wall, he was there for the whole thing instead of just being the taxidermy side. So that was really cool. Dean actually does some killer Euro mounts. So if you guys are looking for a Euro mount, I'll link all of his information down below, and you guys can reach out to him. The cool process you're telling me about, and I got a Euro done, is they use beetles to clean these things off.
So I mean, when you say Euro mount, and again, I don't want hate mail for, talking about the other side of the Euro mounts, but, old school, right? You boiled them. Once you got them good and boiled, you stuck a coat hanger, a wire through the back of the brain, you hit it to a drill, you mush everything up, you pressure wash it in the car wash, boil it, dip it in some bleach, and you called it good, right? And it looks awesome. And then a year goes by, and it starts turning a little yellow, and then in time, they turn super yellow, the grease comes through, and they just don't look good long term, and you lose a lot of the cool stuff. When you do the process like Dean's doing, it's through a beetle process. So you're really putting it into these small beetles over the course of a couple days to a couple weeks, depending on the animal. They eat all the flesh off. So all your cartilage in the nose, the cartilage below the eyes. When you see one of these, it's like artwork, because the cartilage stays and you lose all the cartilage with a blowout pressure wipe peel. And then the coolest thing is a true like Euro mount that you want in your house for a long time. It's almost a month-long process. And animals that are highly greased can be worse. So you literally go from the beetles into a degreasing process. So this is going to be a warm water solution, mixtures of soaps and everything else, and they degrease for a week to 3 weeks depending on the animal. You then get a boil again, then you get a drying process, one more boil, and then you actually go through the whitening process, which is a mixture of like a paint-on tile bleach, and that whiteness will stay forever. So that will stay clean, no oil soaked through, no yellowing, none of that kind of stuff. So it's actually quite a feat when you do it. I don't want to say it the true way and bash on everybody else, but the beetle way is pretty cool to see the quality that you get for such a long time.
Absolutely. And everybody has been in a Bass Pro or like some rundown old hunting shop and seen that yellow skull on the wall and been like, it might need a little bleach on that guy.
The beetles are remarkable.
That's awesome. That's sweet. Well, Thanks again to Dean for doing that. And if you're looking for a Euro mount, you can check out his information down below. But absolutely phenomenal pronghorn. And again, I appreciate you for that one. Wanted to talk to you about scouting. So one of the biggest things I've learned from working with you on the film side is that scouting is a big part of your success. Without it, you wouldn't be near the hunter you are.
Absolutely.
That's something that I took away. There's so many of these groups that, they go out and they hunt and they say, okay, these are the 6 days we can hunt. Yep. And they get out there on Friday, they hunt Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and they go home. Yep. Empty-handed or not. Maybe they get lucky, maybe they don't. There was no scouting. They're usually leaving early because they're cold or tired or just not prepared for the situation, where I think scouting could help. So I wanted to just kind of touch on scouting and why it's so important to start now versus waiting maybe even a month before the hunt.
Yep. So it all goes in process, but there's nothing that competes with knowledge, right? So I always tell people to think of it this kind of way. So when you think about the best hunters in the world, right, whether they're social media driven, TV, written, whatever, you think about the best of the best. I always say, are they successful and are they a role model because they're a better hunter, right? Like, do they shoot better? Do they call better? Are they more athletic? Or at the end of the day, is it like knowledge? Because most of these people roll into an area and there is someone, a guide, a pro, a buddy that says, hey, we've been watching this elk, deer, whatever, for 18 days. Here's the knowledge. They give you the knowledge and you create success. And that's usually the case. Not to take it away from anybody, but there's information being exchanged. And the information is what is valuable. I always tell people I would much rather hunt a bad unit or a low producing unit that I can scout often versus a great unit that I'm never going to scout, because knowledge is everything. Even if the numbers are down, if I scout it enough, I learn everything. I know the animals. I know the behavior. I know the wind. I know the access points. I know where they go when they feel pressure. When you know all that stuff, you can be a bad hunter because all you're doing is putting yourself in their way. Yep. And that's what knowledge does. So other ways to think of it, think about the last time you were in elk camp or deer camp, right? Same thing like you said. Let's just say you spent 5 consecutive days. How many times have you driven home on the last day and you wish I had one more day?
Right.
People say that all the time. They're like, I wish I had one more day. And the reason they say that is because they finally figured it out. They finally spent 5 days. They finally saw animals. They finally figured out where they bed. They finally figured out where they drink. And they wish they had more time. Yep. If you scout successfully, the first day of every hunt would be like the last day of your previous hunts. Yep. So that's where it's at. So when I talk to people, I scout everything. Right now, I'm scouting maps. I'm scouting last year's harvest results. I'm scouting Google Earth, all that kind of stuff. And you kind of take it through the process. But at the end of the day, knowledge is everything. If you have all the questions answered, there's just no room for failure. You just put yourself in their way. You can be a bad caller, a bad shot. Doesn't matter, because if you just get yourself in their way, you're going to create that success. Right. So I look at my block of days and I always live on what's called the 60-40 rule. So right now, sit down with your wife or your work or however, whatever dictates how much time you can hunt. And you're going to sit down and say, okay, I have 10 days to hunt, or I have 100 days to hunt, whatever the case may be. And I always tell people you should dedicate 60% of your all total available time to to scouting and only 40% hunting. And people look at me like I'm, like they're like, why would you say that?
Right.
And at the end of the day, if you scout 60, you'll never need the 40.
Right.
Because you're going to go in those first couple days, you're going to get the timing right, and you're going to create that success. Knowledge is everything. So 60% scouting, 40% hunting, you're going to create that success. Start digitally, right? So you're learning everything there is to know. The public versus the private, the access points, the, all the stats from biology of, hey, where's the wintering range? Where's the summering range? Where do they calf? And then I actually start putting my boots on the ground the second the young of the year is on the ground. So for elk and deer, you start seeing both the elk and the mule deer give birth in June, right? So late May, June. So by middle of June, almost all the fawns and calves are on the ground. That's going to keep those animals to stay put almost until or into hunting season. So I don't infield scout until the calves or fawns on the ground. So the second the young of the year is on the ground, boom, I'm in the field scouting. I'm in-field scouting for like 4 to 6 weeks. So long range with a spotting scope, hiking around once I find some intel. I'm doing herd counts. I'm watching mature animals versus immature animals. On the elk side, I'm breaking down how the harems are going to work. I'm going to say, hey, in this valley, I have 2 big bulls. I have 100 cows. I have some immature bulls. I think this is going to be 2 mature harems. So I'm like, that's a great spot. I have competition. Right. Or, hey, in this area, I have 1 big bull. He's going to dominate. He's not going to have to bugle that much. I don't like that non-competition. So I break down all that information. Then, like the tail end of the scouting, I don't want to be necessarily where I'm going to interrupt them. So I start doing a lot of like trail camera work. So my final point of scouting is trail cameras and all long range. So I'm not hiking around as much. I'm checking the trail cameras when the animals are nowhere near there. I'm watching from 4 or 5 miles away with a spotting scope. So it's kind of digital, infield, hiking around, getting all the intel, placing cameras, long-range scouting, and then infield hunting them at the final step. But knowledge through scouting is 100% everything in my world.
Well, and the other thing, too, that I think is important to point out is if you scout an area that you're dedicated to hunting, right? Maybe it's close to your house or maybe it's where you heard a friend killed a good bull or whatnot. You may go scout there and realize this isn't where I want to put in for a tag.
Absolutely.
Or turn your tag back in. So I think there's lots even beyond that when it comes to points that are so valuable to kind of maximize your chances. But that's something I didn't really think about too much when it came to big game hunting. But now that I've kind of seen how it's done, it's absolutely changed how I look at the herd and the animals and where I set up and put myself in a position where I get opportunity. And it definitely absolutely contributed to me killing my first elk. So that's awesome. I wanted to quickly talk about one more point, and then we've got a little fun thing at the end here. This point is more for the new hunter. So whether you're watching this podcast, you've never hunted before in your life, or you maybe are looking for kind of a new gun, I think it's important to talk about, manner of take and what rifle are we needing for our once in a lifetime moose hunt versus our pronghorn hunt. Is there a rifle or a caliber that is universal for everything in Colorado? I think for me, I hunted with a bunch of guys. They shot 300 Win Mag. Ended up being a great choice. I think 300 Win Mag's an awesome caliber. But in general, I just did that mostly at the time because that's what my friends were using. So what sort of things are you looking for in a gun for somebody that's maybe just getting into hunting and they're not sure what caliber they need or what sort of things to look for?
Yeah. So there's so much to it, and honestly, it's such an awesome era of technology in the firearm world because back in the day when you were talking long range shooting, it was all custom rifles and extremely high end rifles. And now, we're walking to Bass Pro Cabela's retailers purchasing a rifle and having capabilities of keeping up with long range shooters. So barrels are better, actions are more square. Everything about modern rifles is good. So we love that factor because you can get into an amazing rifle for very affordable now, which you couldn't even 5-10 years ago.
Right.
So that's the cool part there. So as far as caliber, yes, there's absolutely do-alls, and there's sometimes where it's great to have a couple different things, and I kind of break it down to multiple situations. But what I look for in a rifle is basically like 3 things. So number one, I want to impact a lot of kinetic energy through velocity. And I say that kind of differently because you can create a ton of kinetic energy through mass, right? The bigger guns, your 33 calibers, it's like a 338 or whatever. You have a big mass bullet that creates a ton of energy and does that. I prefer velocity, so I want higher speed. I have kind of that concept that when you create that shockwave through velocity produced energy into an animal, that shockwave does better about coagulating blood, about stopping the heart, stopping the lungs. It sends a shockwave through their body. So it is the high speed ripples through their body that are devastating and create such a clean kill,
right.
Versus that big push power of like a big slug that does that. The reason being I say that, the average hunter has a better recovery rate on a poor shot, right? We never want a poor shot, but in the event of a poor shot, if you have that higher velocity, a lot of times you'll get a little bit better recovery because you can create damage through, like clotting type situations. So that's one thing. So I like a fast gun, right? So very fast is huge. I also want a gun that will push through things. So we deal in the high country, we deal with a ton of wind, maybe shooting in snow. So some bullets are ballistically coefficient better to shoot through windy, snowy, rainy type conditions. So I look for a rifle that wants to do that as well. So I think that's kind of a major player. And then kind of along the lines of the velocity, I think the flatter shooting you are, the better you are, right? We all want to range it. We all want the animal to stay put.
Yep.
We all want to make that shot. But how many times do you range it and then he walks a little bit and you're like, am I comfortable to shoot or do I need to re-range? Those slower, more lofty, rounds out there, they can lead to, to an unlawful shot. So you really got to make sure that all that's into play. So like you mentioned, I think a 300 Win, it's an old school cartridge. And I think today it's still one of the best things out there. Simply for the fact that you can mass up on your bullet. You can shoot like a 200 grain bullet. You're still producing a ton of velocity, just shy of 3,000 feet a second. And you are having a high velocity impact. So you're creating that kinetic energy through velocity. It pushes through wind, snow, rain on that 200 grain bullet, more so than like the 180. And it kind of fits all worlds there. So I love that round. And then I think also the kind of cool thing about like a 300 Win, you can go down to almost any retailer, you can buy the rounds, right? So maybe in the last couple of years it's a little harder, but like everything's hard. Right. But it's a very common there, and the rifle will shoot forever. One of my favorite rounds out there is like a 28 Nosler. The average 28 Nosler is burning through barrels every 300 to 400 shots. So this is not that rifle that you're going to say to a first-time hunter, like, hey, buy it. And by the time you're trained with it, the barrel's toast.
Right.
So there's some guns out there that I think are phenomenal and calibers that are phenomenal, but might not be for like the all-around guy. So I think that 300 Win is great. I get a lot of slack for suggesting that because everybody's like, that's too big of a gun for a pronghorn or for a deer. And is it? I don't think it's ever such thing as too much, but it's on the larger side for those animals. But you're shooting them behind the shoulder, so double lung. You're not impacting any meat. You're keeping a very clean harvest, and I don't see any negatives to it. Now, like me in my scenario, I fell in love with the 6mm the last couple of years. So all my smaller stuff, so my pronghorn, all my deer hunts, almost everything I'm shooting a 6mm for. But then all my big stuff, so elk, moose, anything in crazy windy conditions, I'm shooting a 300 Win for. So I'm kind of going back and forth between the two calibers. But if you had one, I don't think you could ever beat like a 300 Win.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's a great point you made that I was going to make as well. Is like you're not shooting these things in the backstrap. You're not shooting them in the shoulder. So if you get a good shot, you practice, and you feel confident in the shots you can take, you shouldn't have any meat loss. So that's great. And then just to quickly touch on this, I think we talk a lot about caliber and gun, but not necessarily as much about scope. I would argue from my own personal experience that scope is more valuable than the actual gun. I think a lot of guns will shoot straight. You can sight in pretty much every gun with any scope these days. The technology is there, even if it's got a bent barrel. So, the question is, what would an average person, let's just talk about it in percentage split. If I'm buying a rifle, how much am I saving for a rifle versus how much I'm saving for a scope? Is it 60% scope, 40% rifle? Is it flipped? What would you say if somebody's spending $1,000, $2,000? Where's most of their money going to
Yeah,
go?
I would say you're probably looking at least 40% in optics at the end of the day. So, and it kind of depends, but yeah, I would say in a lot of my situations, I am putting almost double the value of optics on. Whatever my rifle is, I'm spending double that on optics. Yep. But you can kind of play with those ratios. There's a lot of things out there. Yep. But with that being said, I would say with optics, my 2 suggestions, and I get this a lot. Everybody's asking what I suggest. Number 1, power up. Back in the day, you had to spend the highest amount of money to get magnification. That is not the case nowadays. And there is no overkill on magnification. I promise you. So every rifle I shoot, everything I got other than like an AR platform tactical type firearm, everything I'm shooting is going to be a 5 to 25 by 50, right? So even on like my 22s, my 17s, I'm running those bigger scopes. Yep. You don't miss when you can zoom in, right? So everybody's shooting a 3x9 or, you're like, oh, I'm going to step up to a 4x12, right? When you're zoomed in on 12, there's room at a couple hundred yards to pull off that animal. When you crank it to 25, it's like the animal's this big. So even when you're wobbling, your mind will hone in on a spot, and you will miss less just because you can literally see. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think magnification is everything. Everything I shoot, if you're going to buy a rifle, you're not going to spend that much more. 5x20, 5x50. Every manufacturer out there makes a 5x25 by 50. Get that. Maybe a 4x20, but give yourself those higher end magnifications. You're going to miss less. And I think probably the biggest thing that's not talked about is a great base in rings. I think so many people buy a great gun, buy amazing optics, and then buy the cheapest rings they can find. So I would love to have, a one-piece Picatinny rail that I can start off being square, right? And then I'm going to put larger competition-style rings on there. You do that, and you can anything you want, rattling around, the truck's in the, truck, whatever, or the rifle, whatever you do to it, it's not going to come off. It's the poor rings, the poor mounting, when all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, my rifle's not dialed in anymore. The gun didn't change. Right. It's literally all in the optics and more so the mounting and the rings of that. So I think higher magnification and then spend the money on the bases and the rings, and you're in the zone.
Yeah, good points there. Bases and rings for sure. And yeah, it sucks because you spend all that money that you're preparing, right? You've already thought, I need a scope, I need a rifle, but you don't necessarily think none of that stuff comes with the mounting hardware.
I mean, that's like the rifle we're looking at right there in my shop. It's a $600 Ruger American, right? Yep. So, I mean, that's a lot of money, but in the scheme of guns, you can spend a lot more. Oh, you know, and then on that optic on that, I got a Strike Eagle, so we got a $1,000 scope, so almost double the value of the rifle. Yep. But my rings are $240. My base is $100. So, I have, 300 something in bases and rings. Yep. 1,000 on the scope. So at the end of the day, the rifle is almost the cheapest end of the deal.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a gun that I could lay down that literally I went to Bass Pro, got from Bass Pro, and I can sit down and I can shoot 4-inch groups at 1,000 yards. Yeah. With a factory gun from Bass Pro that I can put together in 2 minutes. Yeah. So, spend the money on the right stuff. Not necessarily spend the money on the right objects, and you'll be good.
Yep, absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks for the tips there. That's super helpful. So before we wrap up here, I wanted to talk about a little piece of equipment we have on our desk here. So when I first met Nate, every video I had ever seen him in, he had this necklace on, and I called it puka shells because that's what it looked like to me. But they were giant, and I'm like, where the heck did you find puka shells that were that big? Well, it turns out that this baby right here that we're about to show you is not puka shells at all.
Puka shells, I got a lot of people saying they were garlic, and I was scared of vampires. I got that a lot.
I could see that. They look like little cloves.
So for, a major portion of my life, everybody saw me with that necklace on. I never, ever took it off. It is the ivory teeth or buglers from elk. It's the first 20 bulls I killed in Colorado. I haven't worn it in, 8-9 years. Mandy hated it, but was a very supportive wife. She let me wear it, for our wedding and for everything.
You wore it at your wedding?
I did. Wow. And for the goodness of the stars, a great buddy of ours, Tim Glom, long-term friend, was filming me, and they kept rattling on film. And he was like, I can't handle it anymore. He was like, I've dealt with that rattle on audio for 8 years. He's like, I'm not doing it anymore. He goes, take it off. So we were on a contract with the World Fishing Network, and I wore it every day. And he's like, you can't wear it during these shoots. He goes, it's just too loud on my audio. It's driving me nuts. So I started taking it off for a film shoot. And then Mandy was just like, please don't put it back on. So it hasn't been updated in about 10 years, so it's missing quite a few teeth. But yeah, the first 20 bulls I killed, they're on that necklace. I wore it. I mean, it never came off. It's funny because right now on the back of my neck, there's still a mark like tattooed in because it's black coated wire that I put it on, so it will never break.
Sure.
So I'm literally tattooed around the top of my neck from that necklace. Never took it off though. So you find any old pictures, you'll see it. And yeah, not garlic, not puka shells.
Not puka shells.
2 teeth for the first 20 bulls I killed.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's almost better than a tattoo because I mean, you think about all those memories, man. That's a ton of work right there. So that's awesome. That's pretty cool. I just I thought that was a neat little stat to throw out there is what you were wearing. Speaking of what we are wearing, if you see during this podcast, I've been wearing this goldfish foil shirt. I am getting a Shopify store put in place at the moment, and we are going to sell these gold foil walleye t-shirts. I'm playing around with the idea of maybe doing different fish too, but the walleye is like my pinnacle fish, so I think we're going to stick with that for now. We're going to have these in white and black, potentially gray, not 100% sure. But once I get that launched, I will definitely give you guys an update. The shirts aren't going to be that expensive. I'm not going to try to nickel and dime people. The reason it's taken so long, I hate buying a t-shirt, throwing it in the wash, and then 3 times later, the t-shirt's ruined. And I just paid $30 to support some creator and then realized that the shirts are crap. So this one I have put through the ringer. I've had this shirt for about 6 months. I've probably washed it realistically about 50 times. And it's because I wear it a lot, but it's also because I'm trying to test it. What it is it's an adhesive fish. And then you lay the foil over the top, and then it sticks to that adhesive, and it's actually much, much better than doing it in one piece.
I like it.
So it took a little bit of research and design, but here we are. We have the Colorado Fish shirt. It is a first exclusive for Catching Colorado gear. So I'm thinking around, maybe like $25, $27, something like that, shipped. So check them out on the site once we get them put up. But speaking of wear, Nate's got something to tell you about clothing. He's got something of his own.
Yeah, we're excited. In the near future, we're going to have a whole hunting website. So I know this podcast is all about hunting. We've been talking about fishing the last couple of podcast times we got together. So we're going to have huntnatezelinsky.com. It's going to be an awesome website. So it's going to be all the education we've done in the last couple of years, all the live feeds from Bowtech, all the stuff we've done with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Ruger content, hunts, all that in one centralized place. So you'll be able to find the links. Some of it will be embedded on the site, but either way, we're going to have a place for all your content, all the education, good place to check out. And then, here real shortly, we're going to be launching a store as well. So on that store, you'll have all the ice addiction clothing. You'll have the Tightline Outdoors clothing. You'll have the Nate Z Hunt branded clothing. And then there's a handful of other items. So, we'll have a whole store coming here soon.
Awesome. That's very cool.
Excited about
it. We always appreciate having you on the podcast. Thanks again for doing this. I'm
Absolutely.
sure we will do another episode at some point. Yep. I'm hoping, actually, this upcoming winter, I would love to do an on-the-road ice addiction podcast episode. Man, the amount of people that it takes to make that thing run and the event itself is just a blast. Maybe we can do sort of a back road happy hour type situation at an ice addiction. That's all we got on this podcast of Catching Colorado. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for further episodes. And if you are looking to reach out to Nate for any guide services or anything, all of his links will be down below. But we look forward to doing this again, and thanks for staying tuned. We'll catch you on the next episode.
See you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more relatable content, you can check out these videos right here. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below so you can stay updated on our next adventures.